Welcome back. Swedish voters heading to the polls this weekend in an election that could see the far-right Swedish Democrats become the country's second largest parliamentary group. According to the latest poll of polls, the right-wing party, which I'll just tell you is called the Swedish Democrats, led by Jimmy Åkesson, is set to win around 20% of votes, with the ruling Social Democrats, that's Stefan Löfven over there as well, set to have around 25%. The centre-right moderate party, Ulf Kristersson, that is coming in, we believe, in third place at the moment on 18% of votes. Now, it's one issue. This is one big issue. Trust me, it's immigration. It's the key campaign issue. Government data shows Sweden has taken in the most migrants per capita of any country in Europe. Now, Sweden is also suffering from a decades-long housing crisis, and income inequality has also increased at a faster rate than any other OECD country. Meanwhile, the Swedish economy appears strong. The country's GDP has grown by 1% in the last quarter, easily beating expectations. The employment rate remains the highest in the European Union, but inflation remained at 2.1% in July, which is the highest level since September 2017. Jeff, Karen, there are so many issues we could talk about, but the fact of the matter is this is once again a Northern European fear, concern story, and it reminds me intensely of the time I spent in the Netherlands at the start of 2017, when the big fear was all about get Wilders, and I was trying to work out what the fear is for a very rich, small-ish country. And the fear was of losing something, not what you haven't got now, not what you want for the future. It's like what you might lose in the future. And I think the Swedes are very, very similar to the Dutch on that respect.
The story is important enough that the producers have felt that we needed to come and sit on these stools.
Where's your guitar?
I don't have the guitar, but I think it's interesting to note that the Swedish currency is at a 9-year low. I mean, this is the lowest level that we've seen the krona sit at since the financial crisis, and increasingly the market seems to be of the view that that is about the Sweden Democrats making gains here, and the market is alive to the fact that if they win a significant majority, or at least a significant minority in these elections, it will impact the ongoing membership of the EU for Sweden. And so not only have you got that sore thumb that is the UK at the moment in terms of sticking it to Brussels and the euro, you've got potentially the issue of Sweden looking again at its EU membership. And I think just from the way that the market is currently analysing the risks around this election, it is notable that we've seen that currency weakness. Having said that, when you've got a negative 0.5% repo rate in the central bank, you can see that there are no good interest rate arguments for wanting to own the Swedish currency at this point, but it still looks like a relatively safe currency in a part of the world that has got some issues.
I think Sweden's an interesting example of what policymakers need to consider in the future. I mean, we talk about all these countries across southern Europe that are having immigration problems, and it's all linked to the economy and the sort of fear that people have not enjoyed this recovery phase that has swept the globe. But if you look at Sweden, as you're pointing out, some of the wealth, the numbers there, the economic growth has been faster than the rest of Europe, and some of this down to the immigration, the amount of skills going into the workforce to propel the economy forward at a faster pace. That should be enough to stem some of the tide of resentment against immigration, but it's not been enough. There is still a feeling about people tapping into generous welfare systems, and also the violence on the streets that has happened that people point the finger at immigrants for. So perhaps it's a lesson around law and order, the allocation of facilities in countries, about how you settle immigrants into new lifestyles in different countries. So it's not just a
long and good history of getting immigrants in and integrating them. I know several and who have done very well, have come from African countries and from Kenya, and have actually integrated fully into the Swedish society. So the Swedes aren't amateurs at this. They know what they're doing on this front as well. But one thing I think that's very interesting about the Swedes, and they do have their idiosyncrasies. I've spent a lot of time there over the years as well. And I'll go back to what might be ancient history for some of our viewers, but something all of us would remember. And this was the former government. Now, I want to talk briefly about them, because Fredrik Reinfeldt was seen as a darling of the international community. He was centre-right, he was doing all the right things. Anders Borg, the finance minister, was seen, the man with the ponytail and the earring. Okay, he looked a bit offhand. Yeah, of course. Anders, who's now got on to Kinnevik and that, but he basically was the darling of the Financial Times, the finance minister of the year once or twice as well. And Anders and Fredrik Reinfeldt were booted out in 2014. Why were they booted out? Because they weren't seen as necessarily looking after the social welfare. The Swedes pay more taxes than pretty much anyone. They've got a top rate of tax of, I think, 60.1% as well. But the economy was doing absolutely fine, but they weren't necessarily looking after the social democracy side of the country. So very interesting, different from other countries, that actually this government was booted out, and Stefan Löfven and Social Democrats came in because they were seen as protecting some more of those historic values that the Swedes value so much.
But you know, probably among the three of us, you know this country better, or best, I would say. And it has been a monoculture for a very long time. And it doesn't have the same history, say, for example, the UK has, or the United States has, of continual waves of migrants that have been invited in, have come and settled, have struggled at first, but then have ultimately adapted. And not only have they embraced the culture they've come into, but they've changed that culture. It's not been quite the same story in Sweden, has it? And now we're in a situation where governments are struggling for money. The coffers aren't full. We're still recovering from the global financial crisis, and there are these waves of migration coming. And we've seen in Germany, just through the last week, how difficult it is for governments and politicians to manage what appears to be populist sentiment that is against these waves of migrants. And clearly, Sweden is going to have that problem as it comes through this election.
And guess what? Just like the United Kingdom, just like in the Netherlands, just like in Germany, it comes down to your own economic well-being. And I mentioned, I think I had a part of my read, it's something about a housing crisis, and I wanted to pop back to this. The housing crisis is the fact that those who've had housing have had a fantastic time of it because it has gone through the roof. For those who haven't, they haven't been able to get on the ladder. Sound familiar?
I think it's also about ideology. It's not just about the hip pocket anymore. People are fighting for what their values are, and they're having a debate in public about it.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.